just had to do that. I had a selfie real quick. I've been taking pictures of all the speakers in order and posting them on Instagram. So Justin Smith said I had to post myself on Instagram or else it'd not be in order. And he knows me very well. I would actually freak out if I wasn't in there. So I've just told you a little bit about myself there. I am in St. Louis at a church called Element Church. It's a weird name. People make fun of us all the time. We probably deserve it. And I'm father of 4. I'm the executive pastor of Family Ministries, which means I came to the church to be the kids pastor, but I also oversee youth ministry, prayer ministry, pastoral care, missions, outreach, and some other stuff I don't even know. Every day I get some more stuff. So I have a lot of friends in ministry, and one of my friends, he took a church in Arkansas, on the Arkansas-Mississippi border, and he went to this church to try out, first of all, and he noticed that an older gentleman, white-haired gentleman, during the middle of the service, came down the center aisle with a 2-handed claymore, which is a sword. If you guys don't know, that's a big sword, Highlander, cut people's heads off. He comes down the middle aisle with a sword, and this is during the worship. They're singing songs, and this guy comes down with a sword, and he's like, "Where's security?" But this guy comes down the aisle, and he yells, "The sword of the Lord and the sword of Gideon." And he takes the sword, and he just sets it on the altar. And he's like, "What is going on?" So he gets up, he preaches his message. There's like 20 people there. And, they talk, they interview. I guess he never decided to ask about that guy. He takes the job, and he goes, becomes the lead pastor at this little church. And it turns out that was one of the board members of the church. In every single service, this gentleman would come down with Gideon's sword and yell out, "The sword of the Lord and the sword of Gideon," every single worship service. So he's a younger guy, and he's attracting new families to the church, and they would come and they check it out, and here comes elder so-and-so, "The sword of the Lord and the sword of Gideon," and he would just set it down on the altar. And of course, people's eyes were like, we're church people, and we're like, "Oh, I'm not even sure I'd go there." But non-church people were obviously like, "I'm never coming back to this church." And so he decided he was going to wait a while to address it. And then he started addressing it after a few months, like, "Hey, this is chasing people away from our church." I hate to state the obvious here, but hasn't anyone noticed? And, of course, this guy, at one point he had done this, and it, sparked a revival or something. God spoke to him. He saw that that's what Gideon did, and, and it worked for Gideon, so it should work for us. It should create a revival here. And the very thing he was doing to create a revival in his church was actually just like, people, they didn't even need a back door. Let's just take the whole wall off the front of the church. No one's coming in here but our families. And I think I want to talk to you guys about something that's kind of been on my heart. And I think I've kind of seen God doing something through every talk that we had here. And I just want to share from the scriptures with you something that I just believe God was showing me this week. And I love to prepare messages. I have my degree is in theology. I love messages. I love sermons. I love doctrine. I love all that stuff. Our church has a very extensive process for creating sermons. So when I've got actually in the 16 months I've been at the church, I've shared 6 times in the main sanctuary to 3,000, 3,500 people, live. It's like, But even the more nerve-wracking than that is I have to prepare my sermon, and our communications pastor and our lead pastor are in a room with me, and I have to share the message with them. And they have checklists. We have 6 H's that you have to go through, and I don't have time to go through all the 6 H's. But and they're going through, and so I'm like preparing this message, and I'm like, "God, how can I fit the 6 H's in here? It's not gonna work." And I was like, how can I make this work, Lord? Like, I have tons of leadership messages. And he says, I want you to just stop all that stuff. And I'm praying like, it's like 6 months ago whenever I found out about it, like I want to have the day that Scott and Ryan contact me, I want to have my message ready that day. And God's like, nope. I'm like, God, I got lots of them. You've given me lots of them. I can teach 10 leadership facts from Joshua, what we can learn from the life of Joshua, what we can learn from Judges, leadership facts from Samson's haircut. Like, I can teach all those, Lord. And he's like, no, I'm not going to give you that yet. And he gave me this message, and as I was reading literally last week, I'm like, God, I'm getting nervous. I have to be there next week, and you haven't told me what to share. And my pastor was sharing a message at our gathering of pastors, a family that we're part of. And he really helped me to see some things here. And I have 12 employees that work for me through the different departments, and I'm always coaching them. We have what we call a coaching culture, and I always coach 3 areas. I coach hands. That's what you do. It's your skill set. We coach, and when you go to conferences, you see all these things too. Hands is like they tell you what to do. You go and you went to school and they taught you how to juggle and play handbells and puppet manipulation. Like the hands, what you do. And then there's head. That's how you think. The best person for teaching how to think is Brother Jim Weidman, man. He can just tell you leadership thoughts and just, man, he has the best there. But then the third thing is heart. And I really think that God wanted me to focus on heart today. And we had some great messages focused on heart. That's what I love about this, is that it wasn't just about hands and it wasn't just about head and how to think and what to do, but a lot about heart. And I want to share just a little bit more about heart. And in Mark 3, I love the book of Mark, and as there's so much in the book of Mark, but I can only just share. I have like pages and pages of notes, just like God dropped like 20 pages of notes on me just from this. So this like something's coming from this that I'm going to use later. It says Jesus went, Mark 3, I'm going to just read this. I'm reading the New Living Translation, verses 1 through 5. Mark 3, 1 through 5. Jesus went to the synagogue again and noticed a man with a deformed hand. Everyone say hand. Since it was the Sabbath, Jesus' enemies watched him closely. If he healed the man's hand, everyone say hand, they planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the deformed hand, everyone say hand, it's after lunch, I got to wake you up, come and stand in front of everyone. Then he turned to his critics and asked, does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or destroy it? But they wouldn't answer him. He looked around at them angrily and was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. Everyone say hearts. Then he said to the man, hold out your hand. So the man held out his hand, and it was restored. Again, in Mark 7, it happens multiple times. I'm just going to share that 2 witnesses. One day, some Pharisees, this is Mark 7, verse 1 through 6. Pharisees, teachers, religious law. Okay, so again, they come to see Jesus. Verse 2, they notice his disciples didn't follow the Jewish ritual of hand washing. Hands, there you go. Before eating, and this was part of their tradition. They did it, blah, blah, blah. Verse 4, they didn't eat anything from the market until they immersed their hands in water. This is but one of the many traditions. Okay, verse 5, it says, the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law ask him, why don't your disciples wash their? We do it. Why don't they do it? And Jesus, he replied to them, and he was a very seeker-friendly pastor. He said, you hypocrites! He says, Isaiah was right about you when he prophesied. He said, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. What I want to encourage with this message to those watching, those here, this is something I think mostly for me, more so than it is for any of you, is watch your heart. Guard your heart. I remember when I was a kid, my mom bought me one of those little name things that you like hang on, little wooden name things that you hang on your wall. And the verse there was, guard your heart. That was what it said for my name there. And I believe that it's always a struggle that we walk through in ministry is guarding our hearts. When we look at our Easter numbers compared to someone else's Easter numbers. And I remember I have a friend, just a dear friend here in the Twin Cities who's planted a church a couple years ago. And, we had I don't even tell you the number we had on Easter. It was big. And we had hundreds of people get saved. And he had 200 people, and 2 people got saved. And I remember thinking, ha! And I thought, you know what? That's somebody's kid. That's somebody's son. That's somebody's daughter. And that's just as important to God than the hundreds of people who got saved at our services, or the hundreds of kids who got saved that weekend at our church. And it was a heart moment for me to say, God, I'm sorry. I need to guard my heart. And the Pharisees would say that they really were saying this, and that we catch ourselves saying this. That's not the way we do things. They were more concerned with methods than they were with the message. They were missing the fact that here Jesus was performing miracles, setting people free, bringing life to the earth. And they're like, hey, well, that's not the way we do things. Hold on a minute. And they were more concerned with Jesus' hands than they were with the heart of the matter of what he was doing. And I think that's the trap that we can still fall in today. We may say, I'm not like a Pharisee. I'm not a Pharisee. But my encouragement to you is stay out of the Pharisee spirit. Pharisee spirit looks like this. When we value how more than we value who. When we let our methods get in the way of the message. When we make our plans more important, and again, these are all things that everyone's here shared. I think it's amazing how God's knit this together. More important than the people. The plans are more important than the people. That's a Pharisee spirit. And here's the thing. When we let the creative process even get in the way of our Creator, I consider myself a very creative person. I'm on our youth creative team. I'm on our main sanctuary creative team. I do our kids creative. I love to be a part of creative process. But it always comes down to, is this creative process getting in the way of us being clear with the message? There's a phrase in copywriting, and it says clear over clever. And I heard Larry Osborne to talk about this, that often as a church, we want to be so clever that we forget we're not being very clear. We want to be original. We want to be, I want to be so super creative. And I want to be original. I want to do something that no one else is doing. Well, maybe there's a reason no one else is doing it. And that's okay to let God be creative and use you and do some things. But if it gets in the way of making a clear gospel presentation, then we've missed the mark. We've missed the heart of the Father. Because I think when we plan, we should plan. Yes, we should be creative. Yes, we need to value better methods and work to be better and be excellent and be awesome sauce and all those things. Those were all great. But if we miss the heart of it, we missed everything. And I remember that actually one way that I connected with Justin Smith and came to River Valley is he did a conference at his church in Vegas. And I connected with him on Facebook, on social media, and I became friends with him, and I was wishing him a happy birthday. And I noticed on his Facebook there was a young lady who wished him a happy birthday, and her name seemed familiar to me. I had been a kids pastor at a small church in Missouri and was there for years and then had left there, and I was like, wow, that name sounds familiar. That's probably just a coincidence. But then I Facebook stalked her, and I noticed that her brother had the same name. Her parents had the same name. It was the same girl. And so I was like, hey, not to be creepy, but did your family used to live in Washington, Missouri? Yeah. You were my kids' pastor. And I'm like, oh yeah, she's going to tell me all the good things I used to do. Tell me tell me about how you liked how we drove a motorcycle in and drove it up on stage. And we had people rappelling out of the ceiling and shooting stuff and blowing stuff up and blood and jet eyes and cutting stuff off. And it was great. Tell me all about all the cool songs we did and all the cool creative pieces I created. Tell me all about that. And I was like, yeah, she's going to tell everybody. And she goes, and here's the thing I remember about you, is when I broke my arm, you came to my house, you and your wife, and you prayed for me, and Jesus healed me. And you brought me a candy bar. Here she's like a teenager. It's like 10 years later. And I just remembered how much God loved me through what you were doing. You see, I wanted to be known for what I had done. But when God was just looking at how was I loving other people. So that's my encouragement for you guys today, is guard your heart and make it about heart and not just hands. Thank you.